I'm Nadav Shemer with Mining Journal's Digging for Climate Change, and with me is Kirsten Hund, Head of Carbon Neutrality at diamond giant De Beers Group. De Beers presents a really interesting case study, as we'll see today, for how miners are tackling climate change. Kirsten, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Kirsten, due to your dual long-running role as both a diamond miner and a retailer, the De Beers name is obviously, it must be one of the most recognizable names in mining to consumers all over the world. And so I'd imagine this leads to unique types of pressures for your company in regards to your environmental footprint and climate change strategy.
Yeah, that's true. I think De Beers is quite a unique species in the mining world. And we often say, listen, we're not a mining company, we're a diamond company, right? Because we are one of the very few that are directly consumer facing. We mine the diamonds and then we sell the jewelry, the diamond jewelry that people buy as well. We also sell it to intermediaries, of course. But we have, consumers, we basically control the whole pipeline and are therefore directly interacting with our consumers, with the people that buy the jewelry. Which means that those people that buy the jewelry also can immediately ask us questions about where their product comes from and how it has been produced and if it has been produced in a sustainable manner. And I think in addition, diamonds are a discretionary product, right? It's a luxury product that people buy, they invest a lot of money and they want to feel good about it. They want to know that if they buy something so precious and so beautiful, it has been produced in a sustainable, responsible manner. Something like copper wire, people are not going to stop using electrical light in their houses because the copper might not have been produced in a sustainable manner. But for diamonds, they do have that choice and they have the right to know, which is also why, we would do it anyway because it is the right thing to do, but we also get immediately asked and we have to provide that kind of information about how our diamonds have been produced and what their footprint is, both socially and environmentally, to our consumers and our clients.
So in addition to your relationship with consumers, I know you work with many of the world's most prominent fashion houses, and I guess there would be discussions on those sides as well. So have you had discussions with them or other partners along the supply chain about collaborating on Scope 3 emissions and emissions reduction along the value chain?
We have. I think a lot of all the luxury brands and fashion houses are facing the same challenges as we do, right? Consumers all around the world are very much aware these days about the environmental footprint and the social footprint as well of the product they buy, and they ask for this information. So a Cartier or a Gucci or a Tiffany's, etc., they need to tell a story about where their products come from as well. So they come to us because we are a part of their indirect Scope 3 emissions. So they come to us and they want to know the data and the details and the information about how our diamonds have been produced and what our emissions are, etc. So we have a lot of discussions with a lot of these different brands on our emissions and on effective ways to share data and to provide that information, and on also to an extent on how to collaborate on making indeed showing and being transparent about the whole value chain and how jewelry has been produced in a sustainable manner. In terms of collaboration, we are really, I think, in early stages right now. At the moment, the focus is really on exchanging data and making sure that we are really transparent about the information that is available and that we can provide. But we are looking at, what could we do potentially with them around nature-based solutions, etc., and develop projects in countries where we could collaborate, where they could see the good we are doing around conservation, around community benefits, around carbon sequestration in Botswana, in Namibia, in South Africa, in the countries where the diamonds come from, so that they can then also communicate that to their clients and their consumers. In the end, we are all selling stories, right? We want to sell beautiful stories and make sure that the people that buy these products know that, good has been done with the production of these goods.
And obviously, you've been an early mover, both in your own operations and also in partnership with your parent company, Anglo American. I think have been quite prominent with a number of initiatives to address your environmental footprint. So could you perhaps elaborate more about your overall climate strategy and and how that's looking going forward.
Yes, so we have committed in November 2020 to be carbon neutral for Scope 1 and 2, so our direct emissions under our control by 2030. And we're now working on developing and implementing the strategy to get us there. And that strategy is really built around 3 pillars: reduce, replace, remove. Reduce is really about increasing efficiency. So how do we do what we do by using a lot less energy? We have a future smart mining initiative. We look a lot at automation, electrification, really operating as efficiently as possible, which makes sense from a climate perspective, but also very much from an operational perspective and a cost savings perspective, obviously. The second one is replace, and that is really about replacing fossil-based energy and fossil fuels. Most of our emissions come from our mines in Southern Africa, where the power in the grid is mostly coal-based. So that is a big part of our emissions. So a lot of the work we are doing is around developing renewable energy at and around our mines. We are collaborating quite closely with Anglo American there. Anglo American is developing, and we're very much part of that, what we call a regional renewable energy strategy, where we're really looking at building one integrated ecosystem, firstly in South Africa, of solar and wind and potentially storage, to really provide all our mines with 24/7 renewable energy, thereby reducing our scope 2 emissions to the max. Scope 1 is really about diesel replacement. A big chunk of that is around electrification. We are looking at green hydrogen for the large trucks. And then we are also investigating other kinds of diesel replacements, which is complicated, in particular in Southern Africa, because there's just no supply. So there's a lot of, as with the green hydrogen truck, where Anglo has done all the innovation to really do something that hasn't been done before. And I think that is the challenge with a lot of what we are doing. It doesn't happen overnight, because everything has to be developed from scratch. So that is, and then on the remove part, that is really, it's like, okay, we need to bring down our emissions. I mean, a carbon neutral strategy for any organization has to focus on how do you concretely reduce your emissions. But for those very last, hard or impossible to abate emissions, we're going to have to offset. And there the idea is that to not just buy carbon offsets from the voluntary carbon market from anywhere, but to really look at, okay, what can we do? What can we develop ourselves within the countries and the communities where we operate to develop projects that do sequester carbon out of the atmosphere, but doing so in a way that also creates local jobs, local opportunities, helps enhance biodiversity, etc. So that's really sort of the strategy for Scope 1 and 2. And then on Scope 3, we have just gone through an extensive baseline assessment to really measure what our indirect emissions are and where they sit, what the big ticket items are. And we're going to roll out a strategy to address that, working very closely with our suppliers to develop a strategy, because we are going to have to bring down our Scope 3 emissions as well.
Do you have a timeline on that strategy, or is that something that's just starting out now?
Well, the strategy is there. We're going to roll it out. I mean, our objective is to set science-based targets for ourselves in the coming year. And that means we're going to have to set very clear targets for Scope 1, 2, and 3. And that means that we're going to have to significantly reduce between now and 2050 our Scope 3 emissions. We're not going to get that completely to zero by 2030, but we do plan to reduce it significantly.
So I'd love to ask more about the second and third as replace and remove. I hope I have that right. So we'll start with remove. I understand you have some really interesting projects aimed at abating emissions. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, a lot of them are in early stages, as I said, because it's the whole voluntary carbon market is at the moment is still, well, so much under development, and especially in Southern Africa, there's a very small amount of actual projects. But what we have done fairly recently, and what I'm quite excited about, is we have made an investment in a small startup called Kelp Blue, which is really a group of innovators that are focused on growing and managing large-scale giant kelp forests, so seaweed, but really massive trees of seaweed that grow at the bottom of the ocean. They're initially focusing on the Namibian coast, where they are starting a pilot off the coast of Lüderitz, which is in the southern coastal area of Namibia. And the idea is, well, these underwater forests have the potential to safely and permanently lock away large amounts of CO2 in the ocean. Research shows that these kelp forests have carbon sequestration properties that are much, much larger than terrestrial forests. And in addition, they really help marine ecosystems provide food and shelter for fish and other species. At the same time, the Kelp Blue plan is to produce biofuels from, they're going to harvest part of the seaweed and they produce biofuels from it, thereby also creating quite a lot of local jobs and opportunities, training local people, and really helping quite a struggling city, a small city in Namibia to redevelop and to boost and to become part of a global green innovation network, if I can say it. And that is for us, that really ticks all the boxes, right? It's the idea is that eventually carbon credits will be generated. I mean, part of what our funding does is help Kelp Blue develop a methodology, because at the moment there is no methodology that has been verified and adopted that actually measures the amount of carbon that is being sequestered by giant kelp. So we're helping them develop that methodology, which then can also be used globally, not just in Namibia. Eventually, we hope to be able to get the carbon credits out of it, but in the meantime, the co-benefits around enhancing biodiversity, creating local jobs, stimulating local innovation are very much important for our investment and for our longer-term building forever sustainability goals as well.
And if I can ask, just for you to elaborate a bit more on their place. So you mentioned, obviously we're watching with interest as well, Anglo-Americans pilot project. I think it's pilot stage at the moment with hydrogen trucks at the PGM mines, one PGM mine at the moment, I think, and possibly more in future. Do you, so where does De Beers fit within that at the moment? Are you sort of a party to that pilot, and then, you know, if it were to roll out further, you would be a part of that, or are you looking at it as part of an overall, you know, your overall research into hydrogen or various other forms of electrification?
It's all, I think none of us can get to zero by applying just one solution, right? So it needs to be a mix of all these different pieces. And the green hydrogen truck, the new gen Anglo-American project, is very much part of that strategy. So Anglo, they launched in May this year, right? They unveiled the prototype of the world's largest hydrogen-powered mine haul truck in Mogalakwena, their platinum mine in South Africa. So that was really the first one that was launched. But the idea is to do a rollout throughout the organization. And we are in particular looking at Botswana, or the Botswana mines, because, well, green hydrogen trucks cannot, they are massive. They are really, at the moment, meant for open cast mines underground. They cannot be used underground. So underground, we're much more focusing on electrification. But for the large open cast mines, it's definitely a solution. And De Beers is very much part of the rollout plan for these trucks. So we're working very closely and we're quite excited about it. At the same time, there's work that's done in both South Africa and Namibia, looking at with these countries that are really planning to, as part of their transformation strategy, to develop green hydrogen, about how can we help, how can we support these countries' ambitions as well, because we definitely see hydrogen as part of the solution moving forward.
Kirsten, thank you for taking the time to share what De Beers is doing on climate change with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.